It's time for good energy, and I'm Dr. Julie, and welcome to Bodyful Day 281. We are talking about Candida and the senses, and today we're talking about the kinesthetic sense. Remember that the kinesthetic sense is where your muscles and joints are in space. It's also a little bit about how they're reacting to things that are going on inside of you. So today we're going to talk about how the kinesthetic sense can be both good energy and in stressors for energy to heal from Candida. All right, or energy to have balanced Candida. Let's begin with our basics. Take a deep breath in and release. Deep breath in, expand in the belly, expand in the chest, expand in the sinuses, and release. And now we're talking about the kinesthetic sense. And what's very interesting is that the kinesthetic sense is where your muscles and joints are in space. And bloating and constipation are the feel of that in your gut is actually kinesthetic. You can feel the stretch. The pain that goes with it is obviously the sense of touch, but there's still a stretch indication in your nervous system telling you what's going on in your gut. So one of the interesting things about the kinesthetic sense is that it exists in the pelvis. And in the pelvis, particularly on your right side, you have the ileocecal valve. And the ileocecal valve is a muscle, so kinesthetic. And when you eat too much sugar, and that activates your Candida, you may have an increased right hip pain. So think about Halloweens, Christmases, Thanksgivings, Easters, Independence Day parades, things like that where you have eaten a lot of sugar, more than you normally would. And remember if you can think back to was there some corresponding hip pain? Was there something going on there? And breathe into that. And release. So our goal here, of course, this is day 2 of Candida and the senses, is to figure out how to use the senses to get us some information about what is going on in the body when we have a particular condition. Of course, we're talking about Candida. Candida is the overgrowth of fungus. This fungus, as all funguses do, particularly loves sugar, and it has a tendency to grow within the body, and it can grow in different locations on your skin, in your sinuses, in your mouth, in your gut. And when we have that overgrowth, it doesn't necessarily affect our muscles and our joints here, though the inflammation can lead to increased arthritis or increased just generalized inflammation in the joints. So you can get arthritis type sensations from too much sugar. But what I want to talk about is this ileocecal valve. So the ileocecal valve is the junction between the small intestine and the large intestine. Food has to go through this valve before it gets from the small intestine to the large intestine. And that valve is notorious for closing off when there are things that are coming from the small intestine that are not good. And one of those things is alcohol. So what's interesting about the ileocecal valve is that when you eat a lot of sugar and you flare up your Candida, because remember, I've talked about the fact that Candida, the overgrowth of Candida, is indeed a side effect of something else. It is a symptom of an overall cause, but it still doesn't mean it can't behave like everybody else talks about it. If you eat too much sugar, you will have an increase in your Candida. So those two components are true. And if you have a Candida overgrowth and you eat too much sugar, you will be producing alcohol in your gut. Fungus, mold, yeast makes alcohol. And so the alcohol growth, the alcohol production gets to your ileocecal valve, and your ileocecal valve goes, nope, I am not going to let that through. That is alcohol. We're just going to close it off and say no. And so you need to open up that ileocecal valve so that you can actually get that garbage through the body. And in order to do that, we have talked about this before. We've talked about holding that ileocecal valve or massaging that ileocecal valve point. And so what you do, if you remember right, find your hip bone, lay a blade across your hip bone, go over 4 fingers and drop it. That is your ileocecal valve, 4 fingers from your hip bone. That is your ileocecal valve, and you can hold that. If it's inflamed, it will be painful, and you can hold it until it releases, or you can massage upward. And I usually massage upward about 20 times. That releases a lot of that tension, and then the system opens up, the ileocecal valve opens up again, and things can pass through. So hip pain, ileocecal valve, and Candida, they go together. And the other interesting thing is I talked about this alternation between constipation and diarrhea that can come from having a Candida infection. It happens because of that valve. If the valve closes off, then you end up with constipation. If the valve is at the point where there's so much pressure that it says, nope, that's it, it lets the gates flow, and you have the opposite effect. So keeping that valve happy kinesthetically by massaging it is going to help your overall function in your intestines. It's not going to solve the underlying problem, but it is at least going to make the symptoms bearable. All right. I hope you are having a good day. I will meet you back here tomorrow. Let's finish this off. Take a deep breath in and release. Have a great day.